John chapter 10, let's have a look at what he says. The good shepherd and his sheep. Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate but climbs in by some other way is a thief and robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and he leads them out. When he has brought out all of his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize the stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus tried again. He said, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and they'll go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I've come that they might have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and he runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and he cares nothing for the sheep. I'm a good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. So you see there's a lot going on. There's a lot about sheep and shepherds and then gates, and it's actually a little bit tricky at first reading to follow what Jesus is saying. Who is he? Is he a shepherd? Is he a gate? Is he a shepherd again? What kind of shepherd is he? And so we're going to have a look into that. Now, us in Australia have a bit of an advantage because we're vaguely familiar with sheep, or at least we like to think we are. I know my personal experience has been like 2 or 3 times helping out on my mate's farm, and that doesn't make me an expert. But the people in Jesus' time who were listening, they know a lot more about sheep, and they know a lot more about the metaphors that Jesus is talking about. So even the average person knows that their history, of which they're very proud, includes some famous shepherds. And basically all of their famous people were shepherds. So you've got Abraham, who was a shepherd, Isaac, shepherd, Jacob, shepherd, even King David, before he became a king, was a shepherd. And now we've got Jesus not just saying that he's a shepherd, but saying that he is a good shepherd, meaning the one who is most excellent at his job, the most able shepherd there ever is. He would win the gold medal if there was one for shepherds. So let's have a look at what it means for Jesus to be the good shepherd, and we'll look at what it means for us, to you and me, that he's the shepherd. Now, first of all, when Jesus says he's the shepherd, he's highlighting 3 particular things about himself. And the first thing that we learn about Jesus is that he knows the sheep. Now, I've only worked with sheep a couple of times, and I'm sure you may probably, that's about the limit to your experience. I don't know if you've got any actual farmers of sheep here, but you've probably heard of sheep's reputation. I'm going to go with it. And that is, like, they are not exactly the smartest of animals, at least by reputation. And from the bits that I've heard from my mates, that's pretty true. Put it this way, most animals, if you open the gate and let them out, they're going to do one of 2 things. The first thing they might do is be like, yes, I am free, and they will run. They will run away. They'll become wild again, Free Willy kind of style. They go off into the wild, and they will live their little wild life that they were always meant to live. The second thing an animal might do if you let it free is that it might just come back home. So maybe, like if you had a dog, your dog really likes you, it goes out the front, it might have a sniff around, and then be like, actually, I prefer to be at home. Maybe you move house and you take your cat with you, and the cat probably likes your house more than you, and it's like, I'm going back to the old house. They like to go home. And so most animals will do one of those two things. Sheep won't do that. Sheep are followers. And who will they follow? Anyone. Out goes their mate, they go this way, so they'll follow their mate that way. Out their mate goes this way, and then they'll follow that mate. One of the things about sheep is if then they lose their mates, they'll just wander in circles. And the problem is they're also defenseless. So they don't have big sharp teeth. They're basically the bottom of the pecking order. So if you let a sheep free, it's not going to go anywhere in particular whilst being completely defenseless and ready to be taken by anything that comes along. One of my greatest fears whenever I took students on an excursion is every time they cross the road. And my biggest fear is that they act like sheep and the first kid goes to the road, has a look, it's pretty safe, starts walking. The second kid may or may not have a look, but their mate's walking, they keep walking. At the back comes little Johnny. He's not paying any attention, but he knows his mate's crossing the road and will start walking without looking. Not a very clever thing to do, but actually something that terrifies me. It is a problem with sheep and us like sheep in that we don't always look out for ourselves or follow anyone. We don't really even understand how dumb we can be. I asked my mate Brett, he's a farmer. I'm like, Brett, give me a funny story about sheep that I can share to the congregation. And his response, I can basically hear him chuckling away to himself in the tractor as he sends this, is that he said, you can't buy toilet paper because all Australians are sheep. So, that's straight from him. Didn't even give me a sheep story. It's like he gave me a couple other ones before, but I can just picture himself laughing there. But aren't we like sheep? We often easily will see that other people do dumb things. We'll look back and we'll see that we have done dumb things, but we're always kind of going, right, I've pretty much made it. I'm over the dumb stuff that I'm going to do, and I'm better now. But the problem is we're always in that state. Like, we always think that we're better, but we're not. The other thing that terrifies me about kids is sometimes you get a student and they're like, I really want to get a tattoo. They'll open it normally with, does getting a tattoo hurt? Which is a terrible reason not to get a tattoo. Is just the fear of the pain. But normally what I don't do is I don't tell them, don't get a tattoo because you're a teenager and you're dumb. And it is actually a bad idea for most teenagers. Not all of them are dumb, but they can act pretty dumb, especially in groups. What I do is I ask them to think back a few years ago to when they were 10 or 11 and 12, to the first Hotmail or Gmail account they ever made or PlayStation account, and what is actually that account name. Maybe it's like Pretty Pink Princess at gmail.com or Randall Shreds at guitar at Gmail. And then imagine if as a 12-year you were allowed to tattoo that very excellent saying onto your body because you thought at the time it was very cool. Terrible idea. I know personally I would have "Do a Burnout" tattooed on me somewhere, which is arguably even worse than "No Regrets." But we all know that we weren't very sensible. We're always in the state of thinking we are sensible now, and sometimes it takes a little bit of looking back to realize actually we can be dumb sheep a lot. The second way that we're like sheep is that we're dependent followers. We will always be looking for something or someone to follow. Like the sheep, we'll see whoever's in front of us and maybe follow them. We'll look for somebody that we admire and we'll follow them. Or maybe it won't even be a person. Maybe it'll be something that gives us meaning in life. And we like this is a job that I love and this job is about me and that's what I love to do. And so that becomes part of our identity. Or maybe we're always looking for that relationship that will complete us. Or maybe a sportsman or sportswoman who trains their whole life to get into the Olympics or to reach the pinnacle of their sport and they just fall short. So we're, like sheep, are always chasing something to give us meaning, something to follow. But like sheep, we also tend to put that faith in something that is not actually good for us in the long run, something that can't give us strong meaning in the long run. So we need something greater than ourselves, outside of ourselves, to give us meaning in this life of so much uncertainty. And Jesus, he knows us. He knows that we can be dumb. He knows that we always think that we're not dumb anymore, but we still are. And he knows that we seek someone to follow. And so in verse 3, let's have a look again. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them. And his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they don't recognize the stranger's voice. Now, in farming today in Australia, the way that they farm sheep is very different to the way that they used to farm sheep in Jesus' day and in Jesus' region. We just collect thousands and thousands of sheep and we chuck them all in a paddock and it's time to round them up. You get on the motorbike or you get the dog or in the car and you round up the sheep using those things. If the foxes come and take a couple, oh well, that's just how it is. You might go out and try to get a fox, but you don't watch every sheep at every moment and protect every sheep at every moment. You leave them to sleep in the paddock and you go sleep in your house. Now, back in Jesus' day, that's not how they did it. What they would do is at each village, they would have a sheep pen. And that sheep pen is a place that a number of families would come and leave their sheep in that pen at night time. And it's not just normal fences. They might build big stone fences, put sharp things on the top to protect from other people that might come and try to take your sheep. They'll have some shelter inside for the sheep, so if it's raining, they can get under the shelter. An open air bit, so that if it's cold, they can get some sun, and it's a pretty excellent place for sheep to be protected. So what will happen is the shepherd who's been out tending his sheep, taking them around the pastures and getting them some food, at the end of the day, they'll bring them back to the sheepfold. The gatekeeper, who's hired to operate the gate, opens the gate. The shepherd takes his sheep inside and they join the other families. 5 or 6 families worth of sheep all are in the sheepfold. Now the shepherd, he can go home to sleep because they've got a gatekeeper there protecting the gate, making sure they don't get out and nothing gets in. And in the morning, the shepherd comes back, he steps in and he calls the sheep. Now, I don't know what actual noise that they would make, maybe a whistle, maybe a particular call, but the sheep recognize that call. And out of the 5 or 6 families of sheep, his particular sheep, they recognize the voice and out they come. And they lead them away. And you know what happens in this verse? Jesus actually takes it to the next level. He doesn't just say that this shepherd has a call that the sheep hear and they recognize. He says that he calls them out by name. So he drives home that not only does he know the sheep and the sheep know him, but he knows them individually, knows them personally. He's standing by the gate going, "Come on, Peter. Come on, Dean. Come on, Jason. Come on, Anne." And calling them, and they're like, "Oh, here we go." And out they go with the shepherds to be safe, but also to get some food. So we learn that Jesus, who knows that we're sheep, who knows the stupid things that we've done before and the stupid things we're still going to do, and he sees all the way through into us, he knows that we're sinful, he still calls us by name. He knows his sheep and he calls us out to give us the things that we need. So that brings me to point number 2. The second thing that we learn about Jesus is that he gives us the things that we need. So Jesus talks about this idea of being a shepherd, but it says that the Pharisees and the people who are listening just don't get it. They're like, we're confused. So he tries again. He's like, all right, I've got a different story for you. And he starts in verse 7 with, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. So it looks here like Jesus has just kind of switched, and you're forgiven if you're a bit confused. But he's switched the metaphor. He's like, okay, how about this one? When a shepherd goes and takes his sheep out into the wilderness to go find pasture, sometimes he won't be able to bring them back every single night. So what he does is he gets just branches, pointy branches and brambles and that sort of thing, makes an enclosure. And once he's finished making it, he puts all of the sheep inside and he then lays down in the gap and literally becomes the gate to where all of the sheep are protected and safe inside of all of those bushes and brambles and that sort of stuff. So if anything needs to get in, wants to come in to get to the sheep, it can't because he's there. He's literally the gate stopping them from coming in. And also, if those dumb sheep want to get out and cause themselves all sorts of trouble, they can't because he is in the way. He's literally the gate blocking the passage of bad things coming in and the dumb sheep getting out. So he says, I'm the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. So you come into the little makeshift sheepfold. You're going to be safe inside. They'll come in and go out and find pasture. So in the morning, he leads them out again and to go find, like in Psalm 23, the green pastures, the still waters, and whatever else that they need. Verse 10 finishes with, I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. Or if you like the old school version from King James, you might recognize, I've come that they might have abundant life, which is still a thing we sometimes hear today. And what does that mean? Well, I think it's pretty important to keep it in the context of us being sheep. So it doesn't necessarily mean just the complete freedom to go wherever and do whatever you want, because that's what dumb sheep are left to be able to do. So instead, a sheep that has a good quality of life is fat, it's contented, it's safe from the things that might come and try to get it. It's well nourished, it's trimmed, it's looked after, it's cared for, it's secure. They know the shepherd, and in this case, they know God. They have someone to follow that won't let them down, a God who gives them meaning in hard times, a God who knows how dumb they are and how dumb they still will be, and yet he still calls them by name. Now, what is the best and the greatest way that the shepherd and that this shepherd cares for his sheep? That brings us to point number 3 and verse 11, which Jesus gets to. And he says, the third thing that we learn about Jesus is that he died for us. So in verse 11, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd, and he doesn't own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. So sometimes you might have somebody who is looking after the sheep who is just hired to do so. Maybe for some reason the shepherd can't do it. Maybe the family doesn't have anybody who can perform that function, so they hire someone. And it's all well and good. They take him out, they find some pasture, and that's okay. But what happens when bad times come? And they do. So the hired hand has a choice. Does he fight a wolf? Does he fight a bear? Does he fight a lion? Or he could run you. So, thinking about this, I've got a survival tip for you that's basically right out of this Bible verse. So, if you're in the wilderness with a mate, if you're in the woods and you and your mate see a bear, you don't need to outrun the bear. You just need to outrun your mate. Because That's what this guy is doing. He sees the bear or the wolf or the lion, and he knows he doesn't want to die, and he just has to run faster than the sheep, and he'll be okay. He just abandons them, every sheep for themselves, and off he goes. It's what happens here. He doesn't care. Now, Jesus is talking to a bunch of people, including the Pharisees, many of whom are actually doing a pretty bad job of looking after the Jewish people. Not all of them, but lots of them. They sacrifice nothing for the people. At best, they're like the hired hands. At worst, they can actually be like the thieves and robbers that we hear about. People who are literally fleecing the sheep, wearing the wool, eating them as required whenever they're hungry, taking whatever's valuable. So what happens with a normal shepherd, though? Well, a normal shepherd is actually a little bit different to this good shepherd that we hear. Jesus says he's the good shepherd, the best shepherd there is, this gold medal shepherd, and he actually does something a normal shepherd wouldn't do. The Bible tells us stories about King David when he was a shepherd, and if danger came, then he would fight it off and then go back to tending for his sheep. So if that lion comes, David will go and fight the lion, maybe kill it, or just scare it off, and then he'll go back to tending his sheep. Or if a bear comes, he does the same thing. He'll take on the bear to protect the sheep, then he'll come back to them. Because why is that important? Because if King David walked out and went, "Okay, bear, here I am," the bear would take him out, and then it would still go and get the sheep because there would be no shepherd anymore. And even if it was for some reason particularly full, then the sheep are still on their own to be left defenseless, and the very next thing that comes along, if they don't kill themselves, will come and get them. So that would be what a normal shepherd does. But Jesus is a good shepherd. Not only is he dying for the sheep, but he actually comes along. He says, "I lay down my life for the sheep." It's a very different way to a normal shepherd. And the reason why he does it, verse 17, "The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life. But not only that, only to take it up again." As the Messiah, the Son of God, not only does Jesus lay down his life for his sheep, for you and me and for everyone who hears and responds to his voice, but he also takes it up again. And he keeps on protecting and nurturing and healing us. Died for us. Where does that leave us? We've learnt that Jesus knows us, that he nurtures us, that he's died for us, that he gives us what we need and still does. So how do we respond? And what do we learn about ourselves? The first thing that we learn is that as sheep that we should follow him. And we better make sure that it's him, not one of those hired hands, not a thief or a robber, not just one of the other sheep. We should follow the Good Shepherd. I was reading a work by Tim Keller about this passage, and he said that there's actually three great things about sheep and about this illustration that teach us that we should follow Jesus in three different ways. We need to follow him completely, we need to follow him unconditionally, and we need to follow him personally. Now, what does it mean to follow completely? Well, it means that you can't just come under the Good Shepherd on Sundays and Tuesdays and Thursdays. What happens with the rest of the time? You can't just follow 3 days a week and leave the others, or you can't just follow in one part of your life and leave the rest. If you're going to be protected and nurtured by the Good Shepherd, it needs to be all of the time, whole life. If you've got one problem that you would like Jesus to sort out in your life, you can't go to him and say, "Jesus, please sort out this, but don't actually look at what I've got hidden behind there." It's not what Jesus is talking about. He says, "I'm the Good Shepherd, I'm the Shepherd King, and I'm here to help you in your whole life, in all aspects." So we need to follow Jesus completely. How about unconditionally? Well, I was thinking about this one, and it reminded me of the parable of the lost sheep in Luke 15. You're probably familiar. And so it talks about a man who has 100 sheep. He realizes now he only has 99. One is gone. And off he goes. He leaves the 99 and goes after the lost sheep, and he finds it. And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and carries it on back. But blink and you'll miss it. Because what does he do when he finds it? Does he just go, "Oh, Sean the sheep, there you are. Come with me, you're lost." And the sheep goes, "Oh yeah, I am lost. Here I come," and follows him back. That's not what happens. The shepherd or the owner needs to catch the sheep, which is probably running around all stupid, tackle it to the ground, tie it up, and then put it on his shoulders and carry it back. Now, how does the sheep feel about this whole process? Probably not so good at the moment. He's probably there like, "What the heck? I was having the best time ever, and now you're kneeling on my head." And he can't work out what's happening, but is it good for him? Yes, it's good for him. Will he be looking forward, or will he have a good time when the owner brings him back to his 99 mates? Yes, absolutely. Does he have a good time in the moment? Not so much. Sometimes our lives following the Good Shepherd mightn't be easy. Sometimes we might want to keep going in a place or in ways that aren't actually good for us. And we need to follow Jesus unconditionally. Maybe sometimes he needs us to be going through something that doesn't make sense, or that hurts a little bit, or something that's hard or doesn't seem practical. Can we tell at the time? No, we're dumb sheep and we don't have that perspective. But we can trust the Good Shepherd, and we know that we need to follow him unconditionally because we'll die if we don't. Now, finally, to finish up, we need to follow him personally. So Jesus, as the Good Shepherd, the one who gathers his scattered flock, not just calls them, but calls them by name. And then, not only does he do that, but he dies for them. And he does this so that he can have a relationship with us. Now, one of my favourite psalms has always been Psalm 23. I don't know how familiar you are with it. It's been one of my favourites, but I've always been a bit confused because it seems to change about 2/3 of the way through. So the first little bit, it's about pastures and waters and good shepherds. You're like, that sounds like shepherds and sheep. The second bit is about going through dark valleys and the rod and staff protecting you. And I'm like, that sounds like a good shepherd. And then it twists and it turns and it talks about having a table prepared before you, which isn't really a thing that someone would do for a sheep. You anoint my head with oil. Again, you don't do that to sheep. Their cup overflows. And then dwelling in the house of the Lord forever with the goodness and love that follows them. But this week, reading a commentary, it talked about that. It says, we have a shepherd who becomes a lamb for us. The lamb who dies, who we've remembered today with communion. So that shepherd becomes a lamb for us so that us sheep can become his family, to become people in a relationship with him. And then the last bit of the verse or of that chapter of Psalms all of a sudden made sense. It talks about how as sheep who follow Jesus, we become in relationship to him. We become one of the family. So, what does that mean? It means that we shouldn't just seek the help of the Good Shepherd when we're in trouble, but we should seek relationship. Might mean reading his word, might mean praying, but to spend that time investing in a relationship with Jesus, in that personal relationship. So we can learn much from the words of Jesus, who is the Good Shepherd, recorded in John 10. He knows us, he gives us what we need, and he dies for us. But also as sheep, we should follow him completely and unconditionally and personally. And if you don't know Jesus and you don't have him as your shepherd, then maybe, or even if you do have him as your shepherd, give a consideration to what things in life are you following if it's not the Good Shepherd. Maybe in one aspect of your life, maybe in your whole life. What gives you meaning? What gives you worth? What do you seek to look after you? And look at the life and the words of Jesus and work out, like the Pharisees were doing, who is this that does some things we don't like, but also does a lot of good, and where do we need to challenge ourselves? So I'd like to end with a benediction from Hebrews 13. It talks about Jesus as a shepherd. It says, "Now may the God of peace, who through the blood of the eternal covenant brought back from the dead our Lord Jesus, for doing his will and great shepherd of the sheep, equip you with everything good for doing his will, and may he work in us what is pleasing to him through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen." So we're going to finish the service there. There is afternoon tea and the tea and coffee. Just be aware, don't go in your normal forgetting whatever you've been told mode and touch all of the biscuits, have a lick, don't like that one, put it back. Don't do that. People will be there to serve you, to give you the things that you need. So please stick around though. You might not be allowed to shake hands, but we'd love to have a chat with you anyway. So stick around, and I hope that the rest of your day and week are safe, and keep tuned to any of those other advices that come out as well. I pray that God looks after you and your family. Amen. Thanks.